Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Tarav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. All right, here we go. Yeah, so it looks like we finished the chapter here. So we're going to go to the next one. One second. Right. Okay, so we're going to Tav Kuf Vav. So it says in the Torah, Ofin befurni velo chayshinan letircha. Oh, so he says, right, that we're allowed to bake in the furni. What is a furni? It's a type of oven, right, that they used to have in those days. And we're not concerned about extra exertion, he says. But it says only that it shouldn't be a new one, right? New oven we don't want. Why is that? The chayshin anshema kifchat ve'imana misimchat yom tov. Because right, so he says we're concerned that it's gonna shrink or something like that, and this way, he'll refrain from doing the simcha of yom tov. So we'll see what that means, right? Let's see. We can check the bit Yosef, perhaps.
Kavod Tarav, are these ovens made of the same material of the new pots? That once they cooked, they harden themselves, and then that will be
Yeah, something
finishing
like
it.
that. Yeah, yes.
Oh,
That
thank you.
that seems to be the case. Yes. So we're gonna see, right? In those days, the ovens were made out of clay, basically. That's the way it was. Today, everything is metal. So anyway, right? It says here in the Bit Yosef, "En modidin kimach b'yom tov kedei lalush." So he says we don't measure. Um, oh, sorry. No. This is the chapter before. We have to go next one. Yeah, it seems like I have two of them up here. Okay. So let me see what's going on here. Tavkuf Vav, and this is also Tavkuf Vav. Tavkuf Zain. Oh, okay. So This one goes down. Okay. So we're saying here in the Beit Yosef, right? Baraita, we bring the source for this about the oven that we just mentioned. Where is this? Besot per kamevi kadei yain, right? It's over there in Betzal, Lamedal Medalef. Ofin befuni umechamin chamin beantichi, right? So it says we're allowed to bake in this oven, right? That we mentioned, and also we're allowed to heat up water, right? In the antichi, right? Which is also some kind of a thing, what contraption there. The en ofin bepurni chadasha shema tifachet, right? So it says we shouldn't use a new oven, right? Why is that? Because it may shrink. So let's see what that means, right? Finish Rashi, right? He brings the Rashi here. Purni, what's Purni? Hem tanurim shalanu agdolim upihem b'tzida. Oh, so it says, right, that we're talking about large ovens, right? And the opening is on the side. As opposed to what? As opposed to the top, right? Because in those days, they had also ovens that they opened on the top. Anyway, so we're not concerned about exertion here. So he says if he has a lot of food and it's not enough for him to use a regular oven, so he can use this one. So now we see, right, what's going on here. That explains everything. Whatever. It explains that what? That, why did we say here that we can use this oven and we're not concerned about exertion? So the reason, it says Rashi, is because this oven is large, right? So when you have a large oven, it requires more work, to heat it up and stuff. Not like today, right? Everything is automatic, everything's buttons, and it doesn't change nothing. But in those days, you had a large oven, that meant you had to also put more, right, the wood in there, and to work harder to get the thing going. So this is the reason why he's talking about exertion, right? When you're using a large oven. Okay, so yeah, so says Rashi, right? Why are we using the large one? What's the reason why? Why don't we just use a regular one, right? The nice small one. So he says because you have a lot of stuff going on there, right? You're cooking a lot of stuff for Yom Tov, so you need some extra space there, some extra volume. So this is the reason why you're using the large oven, right? Okay. So now, right, we have to figure out Shemati Pachet, right? What does it mean that it'll shrink? Right? So, yeah. So he says, right, that because it's new, it will shrink, right? And therefore, he says we're concerned that he's going to do exertion, without any need. Not exactly sure what he's saying over here, but we'll figure it out. So now he brings the Rambam, right? The Rambam katav pek gimel. It says in the Rambam, the Tama shema tipachet betafsid halechem veimana misimchat yom tov וכך הם דברי רבנו כתב בתוספות דעת דתניא אין אופין בפוני חדשה ובפוני גדול מה יראה שיש לחוש יותר שמא תפחת ואילו בפוני קטן משמע הטם בגמרא דשערי. Okay, so again, right, they're all saying the same thing, whether it's the Rambam or the Tosot, right, that we're concerned, as we said, right, that they're going to shrink. Yeah. So we still need some explanation for that, right? So what is the problem with that? So it seems like he's saying, right, that it causes you to have more exertion for some reason. So okay, we'll see, right? We'll see what that means. I'm not 100% sure. We'll figure it out. So it says over here that another thing we said was just in tour, we can right. I'm sorry. We said, right, that we can heat up also hot water on Yom Tov, right? There's no problem with that. So he says, right, you're using antichi, right? So you have to see, right, what kind of utensil is that, and what's the issue there? So he says here, katelanan, so even though it guards the heat a lot, so okay, that's very interesting, right? So it's telling you, right, that this antichi is some kind of a right? A modern day, right, translation would be it has insulation. It's like a thermos type of thing. So because of that, it keeps the water hot for a long time. So when you're using this kind of a device, right, they may think people, oh, he must be doing it for the weekday, right? Because he doesn't need to keep it hot so long for today. So it must be that he's doing it for tomorrow, right? So that's why he tells you that you may think, right, it may be forbidden. So it comes to tell you that it's allowed. We're not concerned about that. Okay, good. So let's go on. Rabbi Magid Katav Perek Gimel. So says Rabbi Magid, right? Perush Antichi Yore Gadola Ven Choshishin Shema Yamru Chelchol Hu Oseh. Right. So Rabbi Magid says a little bit differently. Right. He says we're talking about a large pot. Right. What are they called? Right. Those army pots. Right. Cauldron. Right. Whatever. All kinds of names. So when you're using a large one like that, so you may think, right, that it looks like you're doing it for tomorrow. Like, why do you need so much water for one day? So it looks suspicious. So you may think it's forbidden. So it comes to tell you, no, it's okay. You can use it, right? No problem. Yeah. והכל בו כתב דמחמין החמין באנטיחי ברוש הוא כלי נחושת ואין חוששים למשום צירוף. So he brings another opinion here, right? The Kolbo. Kolbo says a third reason why. A third thesis over here going on. Like, what's going on with this? He's telling you, the Kolbo, that this utensil, right, some kind of a pot, basically, right, is made out of copper. So what do I care if it's made out of copper? So he says, because copper, right, when you heat it, it becomes like harder. It hardens the copper. So he says, comes to tell you that we're not concerned about that. What does that mean? That, if you harden it, it's like you're making a kli, you're making a new utensil. So comes to tell you it's okay. So these are three explanations about this vessel that we're talking about, right? Okay, interesting. Nice variety of explanations, right? Good. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch, which we probably have to bring it up. Yeah, we do. You got to bring it up. Here it goes. No, not this one. This one. Okay, so it says here, as we said, the Shulchan Aruch says, Ofin bepuni, right? As we said, we're allowed to use this oven, right? So as we said, what kind of oven are we talking about? It's a large oven. Right? David, are you there? David, you hear me? Okay, he's not there.
Yes, I'm here. Of course, I'm here.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so you know why I called you?
Why?
I'm not checking to see if you're awake. That's not the reason. Right? The reason is because you read Hebrew, right? You have no problem. So
I have some problem.
okay, whatever. You're an Israeli guy. So your younger days, right? So the word purni, right? Does it remind you of something? Purni.
Um,
How do you
I
say
can't think of.
oven in Georgian?
How do I say what?
Oven in Georgian.
It's really hard to hear you, Rabbi.
Oven?
How do you say oven in Georgian?
Oven. You mean?
Yes, oven. How do you say it?
That's a good question. My Georgian is not.
Okay, let me
I
remind
don't.
you. Let me remind
Yeah.
you. In Georgian, oven is called purne. Purne. All
Oh,
right.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
Here it says purni. Same thing. You see the same word.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
Just
yeah,
want to point it out. You know.
yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
guess you're more fluent in Georgian than me.
Perhaps. Perhaps. Okay. Perhaps.
Yeah,
Not sure about that, but not sure about that. But anyway, right. So you see, right, that this word, has gotten around.
yeah, yeah. I get what you're.
The Georgian language, by the way, is full of words from Aramaic. Of ancient Aramaic.
Yes,
It's
yes,
full.
it's true. Yeah,
You know that,
yeah,
right? You know that.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. So there
Well,
you
it's
go.
an ancient. It's an ancient country.
Exactly. That's what it is. So anyway, right.
Yeah.
So we're talking. It's a large oven, right? Purne, purne. Okay, so now, right, it says over here. Um, so they're large, right? And the opening is on the side, right? Like our ovens, right? Our ovens also, the opening is on the side, as opposed to what? As opposed to the top, right? In the old days, they had ovens where they opened in the top also. So anyway, right? One thing though, right? One condition, right? It shouldn't be a new oven, right? We don't want that. Why? Right? So it says, right? We're concerned that it's going to shrink and it's going to cause damage to the bread. Oh wow! So there you go, right? Here in the Shulchan Aruch, he explains it better. The problem is, it contracts this oven as a contracting kind of thing, right? As we said, it's made out of clay probably. So it contracts. So we're concerned, right, that the contraction of the oven is going to make the bread, it's going to ruin the bread. And this way you know, it'll mess up your holiday, it'll like rain on your parade, right? Shoshana,
Yes,
there?
Rabbi. Yes,
Is it
Rabbi.
raining on your parade there?
It's pretty rainy out here.
That's why you're not getting good reception. Okay.
I
Okay.
hear David just fine. You're faint.
Okay. I'm yeah, you're right. I'm about to faint. You're right. I'm always like that. Okay. So, and as we said, I'm about to faint. There's no question about that. I never get enough sleep, So anyway, right? As we said, that this is the problem with this oven. When it's new, it can cause damage to the bread because it contracts. Ah, okay, there you go, right? Okay, so now we understand, right? I told you eventually we'd get it. I promised you. Okay. Okay, so right. Chamin be'antichi, right? It's also, as we said, right, that you're allowed to heat up the water in this large vessel, right? Even though, you don't really need that much, right? It's a very large. We gave several reasons, right? Whatever. But nevertheless, right, regardless of all those reasons that we gave, it's still permitted. It's a lot of exertion, right? Whatever, all kinds of things like this, right? It's large. You may think it's for tomorrow, blah 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 blah. Come to tell you, right, no problem. That's what we're saying, right? All right, very good. So that's the story there. Okay, so if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll go on. New chapter. Okay. Okay. As I told some of you today, I spoke to a lot of people today. We're opening a new chapter today, right? If you guys know what I'm talking about. We're forgetting about the old stuff, right, Esther? Okay. So we're opening a new chapter
Yes,
there.
yes,
Okay.
I'm here. The
Right.
microphone didn't turn on right away.
Yeah, we're closing the old chapter. Okay,
Yes.
so all right, very good. So that's the story there. So let's go to bet. Let's go to bet. See what's going on there. So we got to read the tour. So it says in the Torah here, um, מחממים חמים, אף על פי שעצים שנשרו מן הדקל ביום טוב או בשבת שלפניו, אסור להסיקן. Look what he says, right? The rule is like this, he says, although the rule is that if wood, what does that mean? From the tree, right? Fell, branches, right? Fell down by itself. You didn't break the wood, right? You didn't break the branch. Obviously on Shabbat you can't do that, right? On Yom Tov, you can't break those branches, right? But he's telling you, right? If it fell by itself, so it tells you the rule is, right? You can't use it anyway on Yom Tov or Shabbat. That wood, even if you didn't detach it by yourself, but nevertheless, right? אם נשרו בתוך התנור מרבה עליהם עצים מוכנים ומבטלן. But he says, you know what? If these branches, right, like fell right into your oven, right? What a coincidence, right? If these branches fell into your oven, so can you use it now? Can you like start your oven or not? Right? That's the question. Because that wood is not allowed to use. So what's the rule? So he says, right, what you do, you pull a little bit of trick there, What you do is you add more wood and you nullify that piece of wood, right? So this way it makes it permissible. You nullify it. So a little bit of a trick there, but it's okay. So tells you here a very important concept, right? By the way, if you guys are ever going to learn to be a rabbi, you're going to have to learn these rules, right? I'm sure all you ladies are going to become rebbitzins, or you already are rebbitzins, right? Whichever one it is, right? So these are, by the way, David, all these ladies are rebbitzins over here. Forget about it. Don't even try with them. Don't even try to outsmart them. Okay, so right, what I'm saying is like this, right? That there's a rule when you're becoming a rabbi, right? They teach you. One of the rules is like this, that, there's nullification, right? The concept of nullification. So there's two types of nullification in the halakha. One is it gets nullified in majority, 51%, right? Nullified. According to the Torah, sometimes it's like that, most of the time. The rabbis, in certain cases, they said you need 1/60th, right, to nullify. So, just the majority is not enough. Depends on the case. It's a whole discussion. I'm not going to get into it now. But there's a general rule that they teach you, right, in this halakha, in these halachot, is that you're not allowed to go actively and nullify something, in order to make it permissible. In other words, you can't take a forbidden food, and say, oh, gee whiz, you know what I'll do? I'll nullify it, and right then it'll be permissible. I'll eat it. You can't do that. Right? Only if it got nullified, b'diavad, then you can have it. But lechatchila, you can't nullify it, actively. So it's coming to tell you like this, right? That here you are allowed to do that actively. Right. So this piece of wood fell into your oven, and now I'm going to bring some more wood, right? Actively nullify this piece of wood. Right? How do you do that? Didn't we just say it's not permitted to actively do it? So it tells you the Torah, right? Here's the secret. Here we go, right? That if it's rabbinical prohibition, you are allowed to, right? This is the rule, So if the prohibition is rabbinical, you're allowed to nullify it. The prohibition is from the Torah, you're not allowed to nullify it. Right? If it got nullified, it's mutar, it's allowed. But actively, you cannot do it. So, right, that's the rule. So good to know this rule, right? So here it's a rabbinical problem, right? Because, like, what's the problem? I mean, the wood fell into the oven, right? You didn't do nothing. So according to the Torah, that wood is allowed to use. But comes, right, the rabbis and tells you, don't use it. It got, it fell off the tree. Come on, that's too risky, whatever, right? So comes to tell you the Torah, since the prohibition is only from the rabbis, you're allowed to nullify it, right? And then you could start up your oven and make your food, right? Make your dinner, whatever it is, right? Bake your bread, whatever, right? So, yeah. בלבד שלא ייגע בהן עד שיתבטלו ברוב. Look what he says, right? You're not allowed to touch that wood until it gets nullified. Why is that? Anybody can tell me? Come on, you got to tell me this one. Everybody should know this one.
Can you repeat one more time the question, Kabbalah?
Yeah. So what Tur says over here, that you're not allowed to touch that wood until you nullify it first. Why is that?
First is prohibited, no? And then once you nullify it, it's allowed, no?
Right, but why can't you touch it? I mean, I'm not going to use it. I'm just touching it. What's the problem with that?
That you will violate the law, no?
It's a muksa. That's what it is, right?
Muksa. Sorry.
It's a muksa problem, right?
And
So,
Yom Tov for the wood?
yes,
the wood that
right,
fell
right.
from
There's
the
also
tree.
muksa on Yom
Oh,
Tov,
okay.
yes.
Okay. The
So
one
this
that
is the
fell from
problem,
the
right?
tree.
The wood is muksa because it's forbidden to use it. So therefore comes the Torah and tells you, don't touch it until you nullify it, because otherwise it's forbidden. It's muksa, right? That's what they're telling you. So that's the story, right? Okay, so, but again, right here, what does he say over here? Do you need here 1/60th or a majority to nullify? So comes and tells you the Torah, you need only a majority. You don't need 1/60th over here. So now I'll tell you another secret, right? I'm giving you guys a lot of secrets tonight. There's a reason why 1/60th rule doesn't apply here, right? As we said, 1/60th is only from the rabbis. The rabbis made that rule. Here it doesn't apply. Why doesn't it apply? Now, if you give me this answer, you're a genius. Why doesn't it apply here? So, okay, well, I'm going to make you guys geniuses. Don't worry. I'll make you, everybody's going to become a genius.
Don't
Except me. I'm sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Don't we do it with hammets? We nullify it so we can use it later. So it's
Which case are you talking about? Are you talking about a specific case?
in Pesach.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's a good one, what you're saying. Good one.
So we nullify it so we can use it later. Otherwise, we can
Right. What does that mean? We're going to use it after Passover, right?
After Passover, yeah.
So why is that? Because it's going to be only rabbinical then, right? The prohibition. That's the point, right? After Passover, the prohibition is only rabbinical. But on Passover, the prohibition is from the Torah, so you cannot do it. You cannot use it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why you got to wait till after. That's the whole point. Good. I'm glad you brought that up, right? It's a good point. But anyway, right? So here, you don't need 1/60th. Why is that? No. This is a good question, right? So I'll give you guys the answer, right? You guys are lucky. You're learning all this good stuff. Right? The reason is because the 1/60th rule was made by the rabbis. What's the purpose of that? So the rabbis say, that if it's going to be nullified in 1/60th, that means that you will not taste that prohibited food there. It'll be like the taste will be nullified. You will not taste it. Okay? And that's why they made the 1/60th rule in certain cases. Because they don't want you to taste the prohibited food. So if it's there, if you got 1/60th there or more, right, you will not taste it. What about the wood? Who cares about the taste, right? You worry about the taste of the wood? You're going to eat the wood? Right? So it doesn't apply over here. You got it? Doesn't apply. So therefore, the rule is it gets nullified in majority. Okay? So, yeah. So then he goes on. So he says, right, ואחי רבנו יחיאל כתב שאם נפלו בתנור בשבת אסור להסיקן ביום טוב של אחריו אפילו על ידי ביטול ברוב ולא דמה לנשרו ביום טוב בהאי לקה אלא איסור דרבנן גזירה שמא יעלה ויתלוש. So now comes the tour, right? And they're giving you here a family lesson right over here. So right, who's the father of the tour? Right? You guys know who the father is, right?
The Rosh, no?
The Rosh, right? The Rosh is the father of the tour. But now comes the tour and tells you, right? They have more rabbis in the family, right? Besides those two, they have also his brother, right? His brother was also rabbi. So what was his brother's name? Yechiel, right? Rabbeinu Yechiel. Oh, Yechiel. Right? So comes the two and tells you that his brother, Rabbeinu Yechiel, doesn't agree with this. In other words, he forbids, right, to do this, to nullify like that. שאם נפלו בתנו בשבת אסור להסיקן, ביום טוב שלאחריו, אפילו על ידי ביטול ברוב, ולא דומה לשלו ביום טוב. So, but it's interesting, right? He only says this in a certain case that's forbidden. What case is that? So he says, we're talking about, listen to this now, right? Very sharp stuff going on here, right? So he says, when is it forbidden to use the wood like that, to nullify it, whatever? So he said, that's only if it fell into the oven on Shabbat. And then the next day is Yom Tov, right? So he says, you can't nullify it now. So look what this rabbi says, right? Rabbeinu Yechiel. He says that the reason is because they only permitted if it fell in there on Yom Tov, right? But this fell in on Shabbat. So that they didn't permit, he says. Okay, well, right, that's the story there. Okay. So right, we seem to have a machloket over here in the family, right? It's a family feud, family dispute, right? Okay, so the Torah says one thing, Rabbeinu Yechiel says something else a little bit. Okay, so let's go on a little bit. ולא דמה לנשו ביום טוב, ויגיד ברקע אלא איסור דרבנן גזר שמי יעלה וקטילו שבת ינח שנשו בשבת אסור מדאורייתא. Look what he says. Wow. Now this is something which I never would have, contemplated. He says this rabbi, Rabbeinu Yechiel, the reason why it's different if it falls in on Shabbat or Yom Tov, so he says because when it falls in on Shabbat, the prohibition is from the Torah. Whoa, wow. I don't know how he got that from, right? Where he got that from. Right? I'm baffled with that one. How's the prohibition from the Torah? I don't know. Anyway, it's Yom Tov bishum de'achana. Okay. So he says, right, the prohibition is because of hachana. What does that mean? That Shabbat is preparing for Yom Tov, right? So he says that preparation is from the Torah. So he says because the prohibition is from the Torah, we don't nullify it actively, right? That's the thing. But honestly, I have to tell you, we haven't seen the Bet Yosef yet, but my feeling is we're not going to paskin like this, Rabbeinu Yechiel. It doesn't seem like it's 100%, halachically sound. And I'll tell you why. Because where do we get this concept of preparing one day to the other? We talked about this before, right? If you remember, one day cannot prepare for the next day, right? We talked about this already. We covered it. So, the same thing applies when you have Shabbat and Yom Tov, right? One after the other. So Shabbat cannot prepare for Yom Tov. Obviously, right? All the more so. Right, he tells you that, but that preparation is from the Torah, right? But the truth is, according to there are several opinions brought down there in the Gemara, but I think the conclusion over there is that it's from the rabbis, this prohibition, preparing one day to the other. So I don't know where he gets this concept of that it's from the Torah. Seems to be sort of a minority opinion here. Okay, but anyway, right? Let's see Bet Yosef, right? Bet Yosef knows better than me. I think you guys know that, right? So let's see, right? What he says there. Okay, so he says over here, Bet Yosef. The Perek Kama de Betzah, right? What's the source for this? It's in the first Perek of Betzah. Dalamud Bet. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, etzim shenashu min hadekel b'Shabbat asur le'asikan b'Yom Tov. Klomar b'Yom Tov hasamuch lo. Right. So he brings this Gemara right over there. Says Rabbi Yochanan exactly what we just mentioned, right? Which is that if the wood falls in to the oven on Shabbat, you cannot use it for the next day, which is Yom Tov, right? Okay. So, right, that we knew, but the question is, is it from the Torah, this prohibition? That we haven't seen yet, but let's see what goes on, right? So anyway, right, it says, כתב הריף והראש ודתמה משום הכנה דרבה ואם משול ונדקר ביום טוב אסור להסיקן ביום טוב בפני עצמן משום דהבה לנולד ואסרו lehu Rabbanan gezerah shemei yale betlosh. Right. So Bet Yosef here brings right the whole thing here. So if it falls in on Shabbat, as we said, right, you're preparing one day to the other. That's the prohibition. Hachana, right? If it falls in on Yom Tov, then what's the prohibition? Nolad, right? It's something new, because it was on the tree, right? It was attached to the tree. All of a sudden it broke, and right? Maybe there was thunderstorms there. I don't know what happened, right? Whatever, but it broke, and got detached, and it came down into the oven, right? Landed in the oven. So that's the story, right? So okay, so right, let's go on. This is the Gemara that tells you, right, this whole concept here. So that what she said, right, the Torah, that you're allowed to nullify, as we said, right, if this happened on Yom Tov, right? Actively and nullify it. Sham amarav matna etzim shenashru min hadekel b'yom tov marbe alehem etzim muchanim umasikan, right? He brings a Gemara that says this, right? The source, right? Same page. So, right, says the Gemara asks a question over there, right? How do we allow this, to nullify like that? But aren't you moving this prohibition, right? In other words, you're moving the muktzah by doing that. Good question, right? So you guys are following my trend over here. When you throw the new wood in there, right? To nullify it, you're moving also, right? You're moving the wood that's already there.
That's the part I don't understand. If you're using this new wood, to grab that piece of wood that fell, then like you say, you're transferring from one place to the other. So isn't that
you're nullifying? Not grab. I don't know not exactly what you meant by grab, but you're nullifying it, right? With the permitted wood. We're taking permitted wood and nullifying the prohibited wood.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
the Gemara asks, right, regarding this, how can you do that? But you're moving you're moving the wood like that. In other words, it's a muktzah. You're moving the muktzah, right? Okay. We have any geniuses over here? What's the answer to that question? There's no problem really. But anyway, right? Let's see the Gemara, right? The Gemara has plenty of geniuses there. So let's see what it says there, right? Kevan the deruba de tera ninhu ki meapech betera ka meapech. Look what he says, right? Interesting. So he says, since the majority of the wood is permitted, so when you're moving it around, right? We go according to the majority. So in other words, I didn't really understand the question here properly, right? I have to revise my question here, revamp the question. The Gemara meant to ask like this, right? The question was like this. According to the answer, you see, that was the question. The question is like this, right? That eventually, right, when he heats up this oven, right, to light the oven, what is he gonna do? He's gonna, like flip the wood around, right? You know how it is, right? When it comes to coals, you have to like flip them around, move them. You have a special shovel for that, right? Special rake, whatever it's called, whatever they call that, right? So you have, and you're flipping them around. So that was the question of the Gemara, right? How are you flipping around the wood? You have that prohibited wood in there. So Gemara answers, no problem. Why? Since the majority is permitted, right? It's all permitted. That's what it's saying, right? That's the answer. Okay, good. So now Gemara asks another question, right? Which we already answered, by the way, in the tour, but we have to go according to the, right, the plan. We have to follow the plan here. So what is Gemara asking, right? But where is that again? You're nullifying the prohibition. What is this, right? Actively, how can you do that, right? And we said, right, the Mishnah, you're not allowed to actively nullify the prohibition. That's what it says, right? So Gemara answers, that's only from the prohibitions from the Torah. But if it's from the rabbis, you're allowed to nullify, even actively, right? That's the thing, right? That's the answer of the Gemara. So we learn all the tricks over there, right? Now we understand what's going on, right? So now, right, we have another issue that comes up here, which is that Rabbi Yochanan says that what? I'm sorry, it's not Rabbi Yochanan, Rav Asher, right? Rav Asher says that everything which has permission in the end, right? In other words, with time, it'll be permitted with time. We're not allowed to nullify it, right? So this piece of wood, it will be permitted in the future, right? When will it be permitted, by the way? this piece of wood. It'll be permitted when Yom Tov ends, right? That'll no problem, right? Once Yom Tov ends, it's permitted to use it for whatever you want. After you make Havdalah, right? No problem. So then the question Gemara asks, right? How are you nullifying something which is going to be permitted in a few hours? Right? What's going on with that? But you're not allowed to do that. Another question in the Gemara, right? So what is Gemara answer there? Hanamile de ite leisura beine. Hacha mikle kala isura. Look, so Gemara answers an incredible answer. It says, right, that's only talking about when the prohibition is still intact, right? In other words, it's still there, physically there. But here, right, the prohibition is already burned. So once it's burned, he says, right, it's no problem. Interesting. So we need some Rashi here, right, to explain this a little bit. Still a little bit cloudy here, right? Partly cloudy. Okay, so it says over here like this, right? Piresh Rashi, Rashi explains, right? But you're flipping around the prohibition. As when you flip it around in there, right, in the oven, right, with your rake, with your shovel, right? So Gemara answers, but you're doing something permitted, right? It's a majority. So Rashi says, right, the prohibition is nullified with a majority. So he says that which we said over here, right, that you're going to add some wood to it, right, to nullify it. Masikan, Ketavaran says the Ran regarding that. So, right, it says there is an opinion that says that only applies if you already have in the oven some permitted pieces of wood. But if you don't have anything there, right, only the prohibited piece, right, then it's not permitted to do that. So he says it's also, is corroborated, right, by some of the texts that we have in the Talmud, like that. Okay, עליהם, עצים מוכנים. ועד ימינן כיוון דרובה דהתרה נינו כי קם מהפך בתרה קו מהפך. כתב מסתברא דווקא בשאינו מכיר את האיסור לאחר שנתעברו המכירן אין ביטול מועיל מהם שאין ביטול מועיל בדבר שהוא ניכר לעין. This is also incredible, by the way, concept which you have to know to be a rabbi, right? Right? You have to know this concept, which is that we're speaking about the issue of nullification, right? So nullification has, some rules, right? As we said. So one of the interesting rules about nullification, also a very critical rule, is that if you still see the prohibited element, right, you have to remove it. It doesn't get nullified. If you can still see it, it doesn't get nullified. So therefore, right, comes the Ran and says it must be that here you don't see it anymore, right? Because it's getting burned, whatever, right? Whatever it is, it's covered. You don't see it. Because if you would see that piece of wood, right, that's the piece of wood that fell from the tree, you would have to remove that to use it, right? And as we said, right, the problem is that it's muktzeh, so to remove it is also an issue. So you got a problem there, right? So therefore, says the Ran, it must be that we're talking about that you cannot see the prohibited, wood. Because if you can, it doesn't work, it doesn't get nullified. So why is this so important? Because you have to know this rule, right? When it comes to also nullification in foods, right? That we, often use, in our, right, kashrut, in kosher, right? So what's the rule? The rule is, if you have, a dish, right, or some kind of a food, whatever, which is mixture of several types of things, so the only way, right, the prohibited element gets nullified is if you can't see it anymore. But if you see it, you have to remove it. Very important concept, right, to understand. It's like very practical. So this has like an application, let's say, when it comes to, the issue of bugs, right? Right, bugs. Nobody wants to eat bugs, right? It's prohibited to eat them. But right now, the question is like this, right? Do they get nullified, the bugs? In the mixture, right? So it's a whole discussion about that, right? I've already posted about this. I think this week I posted about this. You can check my post there. But The interesting thing is like this, right? If you see the bug, it does not get nullified. You have to remove it. Yeah. So same thing, right? So it's a very important concept to understand. This concept. So we're almost finished. I'll just finish off this halakha here, right? Might as well. So now we're getting to the point, right, where we talk about the brother of the two, right? Rabbi Yechiel. So he said, right, if it fell on Shabbat, you cannot nullify it. That's what we remember. So regarding that, says Bet Yosef, comments here. Perush deita beresh betza. It says in the beginning of betza, Amar Rabba, my dichtiv. והיה ביום השישי, והכינו את אשר יביאו חול מכין לשבת וחול מכין ליום טוב, ואין יום טוב מכין לשבת, ואין שבת מכין ליום טוב, ומשמע מדברי התוספות, דרשה גמורה היא מדאורייתא מצרה הכנה מיום טוב לשבת, ושמשבת ליום טוב. So right, says the Bet Yosef, that it's implied over there, right, in the Talmud. It doesn't say this explicitly, but right, the Tosfot says, right, that this is from the Torah, the prohibition, right? So Rabbeinu Yechiel, who was saying the prohibition is from the Torah, is going according to Tosfot. That's what it is, right? So we'll see in the Shulchan Aruch, right, if that's halakha or not. Okay, interesting. Very interesting. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch, and we're done. So says Shulchan Aruch, even though the wood that falls from the tree, right, as we said, you're not allowed to use that wood, for fire, whatever it is. But if it fell right on Yom Tov, inside the oven, right, so what you can do is actually nullify it, right? Add some wood there, some permitted wood, and nullify it, right? So he mentions in the parentheses, right, what we already said, which is that what? That, it has to be to nullify it, that you don't recognize the original piece of wood there, right? If you see it, it's not nullified. It's a good point, right? A very important point. Right? But it says, again, right, to reiterate what we said in the Bet Yosef, he says here the same thing, which is that you cannot touch them, right, those prohibited, pieces, until it gets nullified first, because it's muktzeh, right, as we said. But he says, right, if they fell on Shabbat, right, then what's the rule there? So he passes like Rabbeinu Yechiel, right, that this is from the Torah, the prohibition. Right, so therefore, the rule is, right, if it falls in on Shabbat, and then the next day is Yom Tov, right, you cannot nullify it there, actively like that, because the prohibition is from the Torah. So okay, that's it. We're done. So any questions? If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow. B'ezrat Hashem. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. God bless you all. And Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. Keep up the spirits.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
God bless.